In this video, we're going to talk about the do loop. It's a lot like the while loop, but it gives us a lot more flexibility in the ways that we can loop through a section of code. The do loop is basically used in conjunction with two other keywords. As I've explained here in the comment section of the code example, you have the do while statement, so it combines the while with do, and then do until. Now, the do while statement will loop through a condition, and when that condition equals true, it'll continue to loop. But when it becomes false, then it will break out of that loop. Now, the do until is kind of the reverse of that. It will continue to loop through a section of code until the value of that expression or that condition evaluates to true. So it will continue to check if a condition is true, and when it becomes true, then it breaks out of the loop. So again, these are you use these in two different circumstances. Now, not to confuse the issue too much, you can also put the do while statement at the very beginning or the end of the loop. And that has consequences on when things, or how many times the loop is run. If it's run at least once, and we'll demonstrate that just now. First of all, what we'll do is a typical do while statement, and we're going to do the check up front. So in other words, we have our do while statement and our loop, and between those two lines of code, whatever's in here will get run until this statement evaluates to false, at which point then we will break out of the loop and then write a line to the console window. So what we start out is counter equals 0, value equals 10, and we will iterate through this section of code, incrementing our counter by 1, just like we did in the previous video, and taking whatever the value is and subtracting it by 1. So we're going to try two different values in here to test our application. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll set it equal to 10, and we will, here, I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to set this to 11 the first time, and we'll run it again and set it at 10. Build solution. I'll bring up my command window, and we'll run the do loop statement.exe. The do while check first looped one time. Why was that? Because as we started off at the value of 11, while 11 is greater than 10, we'll execute some code. We'll take whatever the value is, which is 11, and subtract 1 from it, and loop around again. This time, is 10 greater than 10? No. And so it kicks out. Let me do it one more time, except with the value of 10, just to prove a point. So this time, we're going to initiate at 10. Now, do you think that we'll ever encounter these two lines of code? Well, the answer will be no. Let's run it really quick and just to confirm our suspicion. And in fact, the do while check first looped 0 times. In this next section of code, within the same example, I commented out the previous work that we had done. Notice that I have a different way of stating the loop. Before we have do while, and then we have the condition up front. But here we check it last. Loop while the value is greater than 10. So what's the difference to this? Well, this is guaranteed to run at least one time before we actually check the condition. So in the previous example, whenever we put 10 and then we check for 10 up front, it ran 0 times. Let's see what happens this time whenever we attempt to run our project using the while statement as the last line. The do while check last looped one time. So we don't do the check until the very end. That means we run this code, we increment the counter by 1, we subtract 1, which brings value from 10 to 9, and therefore 9 is less than 10, it breaks out of the loop and goes on to the next line of code. Now we come to the do until, and we're going to check first the do until. In other words, we're going to put the condition up front. So do until value equals 10 and loop. So we'll start off with the value equals 9, and value equals 9 equals 10 is not true, therefore it'll continue to loop, and when it does, we'll add 1 to the value, and then we'll come back and evaluate again. This time 10 equals 10. Is that true? Yes, it'll break out. So let's confirm this by building our example and then running the application one more time. The do until check first looped 1 time. Great. So now finally, we will run the do until check last. So I'll uncomment out this code. We haven't talked about commenting yet in our videos, but basically it renders any code that's green with a little tick mark ahead of it as non-compiled by Visual Basic. This time we're going to do our check of the until at the very end. So we started with a value of 9. We'll run this, and then we'll check to see if the value equals 10. So we'll see how many times this runs. So this ran 1 time as well. What happened? Well, basically the first time through the value equals 9, we increment it immediately to 10 with this line of code, and then it evaluates. Does 10 equal 10? Yes. Then, since this is an until statement, break out and go to the next line of code in our application, which was writing to the console window. So these are the 4 different ways to use the do loop, use in conjunction with the while or the until, and you can also check before or at the very beginning, like we did in this example, or you can check at the very end, like we did in this example. And you'll have different reasons to use these different methods of writing the do loop. I hope this video was beneficial, that you learned a little bit about the flexibility of the do loop. Thank you.